Hello everyone and welcome to this oil painting time-lapse called Fishing for Compliments. I really hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to like it and subscribe if you're new. And the materials I used for this painting were canvas panel and Michael Harding oil paints, and I also began to use this new paint that I had by the brand called Williamsburg, and it was a gold paint. And what was so interesting about this was I wanted to try a metallic paint in my art because I really love working with metallic paints and I love combining them together. I particularly love when I'm drawing to use metallic gel pens to really liven up my work, especially if it's on dark paper. I think it stands out so beautifully. So I love working with metallics, and I thought I definitely want to try some kind of metallic oil paint, but I didn't really know where to look. I didn't know which ones to get, and I looked up loads online as to what people used, and I wasn't really sure because lots of brands in fact do gold oil paint, but you don't really know specifically about the actual paint, how it performs, because they all have very different textures. So in the end, I really wanted to try this brand Williamsburg anyway, because I heard it was super luxurious, really one of the most luxurious paints, along with obviously Old Holland, which I have a review of. If you have not seen it before, please check it out. I will try to leave a link in the description. And that I've tried, and I think that's super beautiful paint. But the Williamsburg paint, I was aware that it has some kind of a texture in it, so it's not a super smooth paint by any means. It has these tiny grains inside it, which is so interesting, and it gives a really super unique feel to the paint. And despite the grainy texture, it's still very smooth to use, but it has a very unusual finish, almost like kind of matte metallic, if that makes sense, if that's even possible, matte metallic with grains in. But it gives a sort of three-dimensional look, and I wanted to paint this fish inside this composition, and a gigantic fish, so I thought what better way to use it. But another brand of paint I decided to test out in this video was by the brand Schmink Messini, and I'm not entirely sure if that's the correct pronunciation. But what I really wanted to do was to try it because I've heard so many great things about it, and I know that it's meant to be one of the super professional, high quality, and gives an amazing finish and really great for glazing as well. And I love to glaze on sort of translucent characters, particularly with this fish that I was going to paint, so I thought it would look brilliant, and I was extremely happy with the paint. But there was one major drawback which I really feel quite sad about, and that is that I didn't realise, and it didn't state on the website where I bought the paint from, or at least I couldn't find any kind of warning on it. But one of the paints, so I bought two blue pigments, and one of them actually had a warning. I believe it was the King's Blue Light that I bought, and it had a health warning on it. And it said that this, has some toxic pigment in it. And I really was sad about that because these paints are not cheap, and I don't really like using any paints that have any kind of safety warnings on them, even though it's obviously not super dangerous, otherwise they wouldn't sell them. But at the same time, I try to keep any kind of toxicity in my painting process to a lower level. I try to swap in some Gamblin paints sometimes when I'm glazing, so that I use the less toxic paints over the kind of more stinky ones, if that makes sense. To be fair, the ones that I use generally have a very low odour and low, so they don't have any sort of safety warnings on them or anything. But it just made me reconsider using the paint because the warning label scared the life out of me, and I just decided not to use it after this painting. Okay, so moving on to the little fairy tale that this painting is based on. And once upon a time, in this big vast forest, lived a cat named Kenneth Catkin. And this forest was very desolate and huge, enormous, and there were no animals really left there, apart from sort of the odd mouse and things, because there had been a great storm and all the animals had caught this gigantic galleon to escape this forest so that they could live a better life across the water. But Kenneth Catkin had been asleep on that day and had woken up and all of a sudden realised that all his friends and family had gone. And not only that, but all the food, the lovely little animals that he would have eaten, and the fish and everything have all disappeared. They've moved to greater places that have a lot better life and less terrible weather. So for many years, Kenneth Catkin lives by himself in this very lonely wood with just the odd mouse or two to find. And he feels pretty sad because there's nothing much to do. However, one day he comes across a fish, a gigantic fish living in the woods, a genetically modified fish named Gustav Fishman. And immediately Kenneth thinks he's going to eat the fish because this is an enormous amount of food. So in order to save his life, Gustav Fishman says to Kenneth, "Wow, you are the most beautiful cat I have ever seen, the most handsome cat, an amazing cat," and then starts to listen to Kenneth's stories with this wide-eyed interest and tells him how amazing he is and what an accomplished and great cat he is. Now, because all these compliments are given to Kenneth, he feels somewhat bad, and also he enjoys the company of this really complimentary and charming fish. However, in reality, the fish actually, Gustav Fishman, actually finds Kenneth extremely boring and dull. But in order to save his life, every day he listens to Kenneth's stories and then compliments him about how wonderful he is. And Kenneth is really, really hungry and he really wants to eat the fish, but then he doesn't want to be alone, and he doesn't want to live in the forest on a daily basis without this companion. So every day they go through this ritual of talking to each other whilst both at the same time having a secret longing. The fish is longing for the cat to shut up and stop being so boring, and the cat longs to eat the fish, but he doesn't want to be alone and the fish doesn't want to be eaten, so he continues this cycle of giving Kenneth these sort of wonderful and over-the-top compliments that he doesn't really mean. So it's sort of like this hilarious, never-ending story between these two friends, unlikely friends in the forest. So I really hope you enjoyed this little story and that you enjoyed my oil painting time lapse. Don't forget to like and subscribe again if you haven't already, and I'll see you again on Saturday at 1 p.m. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for your wonderful comments, and take care, guys.